The leather portfolio hung in my son's hand, halfway between his briefcase and my kitchen table, and I watched his easy smile flatten into something careful, something rehearsed. "You want some coffee, Dad?" Marcus asked, like he hadn't just walked into my house for the first time in 4 months carrying a folder full of paperwork. "I can make my own coffee, son. Been doing it 68 years. He laughed the way he always laughed when I said something he didn't want to hear, a short exhale through the nose, no real humor in it. He set the portfolio down on the table between us, resting his palm flat on top of it like he was keeping something from getting away. "That's where I'll start. Not because it's the beginning, but because it's the moment I understood my son had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as a problem to be managed. Everything before that morning was just me being slow to notice. Everything after is the part worth telling. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 69 years old. I live outside Asheville, North Carolina, in the same house I built additions onto 3 separate times when my kids were growing up, and for 41 years, I ran a small engineering firm that designed water treatment systems for towns too small to afford the big consulting outfits. I retired 6 years ago. My wife Carol passed 2 years after that, and since then it's been me, this house, a dog named Pepper, and a lot of quiet. I raised 2 children. My daughter Lisa lives in Seattle and calls on Sundays, mostly, and we're close in the way people are close when there's 3,000 miles between them and a phone doing the work of a relationship. My son Marcus lives 40 minutes away in Charlotte. He's 44, divorced twice, and works in what he calls wealth strategy, which as far as I can tell means he sells other people's confidence back to them for a fee. For the first year after Carol died, Marcus called me almost every week. Genuinely, I thought that was him grieving alongside me, missing his mother, needing to hear my voice the way I needed to hear his. Looking back now, I think that was the year he was deciding whether I was worth the investment. The calls started thinning out around 18 months ago. Then it was every other week. Then it was holidays. And then it was holidays where he'd call an hour before dinner to say he couldn't make the drive after all. Something had come up at the office. He was sorry. He'd make it up to me. I didn't hold it against him. Grown children get busy. I'd been a grown child once myself, and my own father used to say a man raises his kids to leave, and if they don't leave, you didn't do your job right. I told myself Marcus leaving was proof I'd done my job right. Then, about 4 months ago, the calls started again. Except they were different calls. "How's the house holding up, Dad? That roof's got to be, 20 years old now? You keeping up with the yard okay? Or is that getting to be too much for you? You still driving at night? Or do you stick to daytime now? Ever think about something smaller? A condo, maybe, less to take care of?" I want to be fair to him. None of those questions, on their own, sound like anything but a son checking on his father. I answered them the way you'd answer anybody who loved you. "The roof's fine. I had it inspected last spring. The yard's manageable. I've got Danny from 2 streets over who mows it for $20 and a sandwich. I drive at night same as I always have. My eyes are better than my hearing these days, which isn't saying much. And no, I've got no interest in a condo. This house has my wife's garden in the backyard, and 40 years of my kids' pencil marks on the doorframe in the kitchen, and I intend to die in it, God willing, a long time from now." It was the 4th or 5th call, when he asked me straight out how much I had sitting in accounts doing nothing, that something in my stomach went cold and stayed that way. I didn't say anything to him about it. I just started paying closer attention. Here's the thing about being 69 that nobody warns you about when you're 44 like Marcus is. People start talking to you differently, slower, sometimes. Louder, sometimes, like age has gotten into my ears instead of just adding a few years onto the calendar. And some people who ought to know better, start looking at you and seeing something other than a father. They start seeing a number, an asset, a account balance wearing a cardigan. I hadn't thought my own son was one of those people. I'd built water systems that still run clean 30 years later. I raised 2 kids on a middle-class salary and put both of them through college without loans. I know how to read a set of numbers, and I know how to read a room, and slowly, over those 4 months, I started reading Marcus the way I'd read a bad engineering report, looking for where the numbers didn't add up to the story being told. They didn't add up. He started dropping by more, always with a reason. Fixing the gutter, checking the water heater. Once he brought a contractor just to look at the roof. Free consultation, no obligation, and the contractor spent more time asking me questions about my retirement accounts than about shingles. I answered politely, and didn't tell either of them a thing that mattered. I called my daughter Lisa in Seattle that week, on a Wednesday, which wasn't our usual day, and she picked up on the first ring, worried, because a Wednesday call from her father wasn't normal. "Everything okay, Dad? Your brother's been coming around a lot." There was a pause on the line I didn't like. "Has he?" she said, and it wasn't a question. It was confirmation of something she already suspected. "You know something I don't? I know he called me about 6 weeks ago asking if I thought you were doing okay on your own out there. Asked if I'd noticed you repeating yourself, forgetting things. I told him, you're sharper than both of us put together and to leave you alone." I sat with that for a long moment after we hung up. My son had been building a story about me, not to my face behind my back, to my daughter, probably to other people I didn't know about. A story about a confused old man who couldn't be trusted to manage his own affairs. And I hadn't given him a single fact to build that story out of, which meant he was building it out of nothing but my age and his own convenience. That's when I stopped being hurt and started being careful. I want to tell you something about myself, so you understand what happened next wasn't revenge, not really. It was closer to what I used to do for a living. When a water system started failing in some little town in the mountains, my job wasn't to get angry at the pipes. My job was to figure out where the failure started, trace it back, and fix it before it took down the whole system. That's what I did with Marcus. I traced it back. I called an old friend of mine, a woman named Rosalind Chen, who I'd known for almost 30 years. We'd served on the same water authority board back in the 90s, long before either of us was thinking about retirement, and we'd stayed friends the slow, comfortable way old colleagues do a lunch every few months, a Christmas card, a phone call when one of us lost a spouse. Rosalind had gone on to become an elder law attorney about 15 years ago, after watching her own mother get taken advantage of by a nephew who'd talked her into signing over power of attorney and then quietly drained her accounts before anyone caught on. Rosalind built her entire second career around making sure that didn't happen to anybody else, if she could help it. I called Rosalind on a Tuesday morning and told her everything. The questions about my finances, disguised as concern for my well-being. The contractor who cared more about my bank accounts than my roof. The conversation with Lisa about Marcus quietly suggesting I might be losing my grip. Rosalind listened without interrupting, the way good lawyers do, and when I finished, she was quiet for a second. "Walter, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Has Marcus ever asked you to sign anything? Anything at all? Even something that seemed small or routine?" I hadn't thought about it that way, but the second she asked, it came back to me clean as day. 2 months earlier, Marcus had brought over a stack of what he called just some updated paperwork for the estate, nothing major, just cleaning up some old language. I'd been in the middle of fixing a leak under the kitchen sink and told him to leave it on the counter. I'd look at it later. I never had. It was still sitting in a drawer. "There's papers," I told Rosalind. "I never signed them. I never even read them, honestly. I want you to find them," she said, "and I want you to photograph every page before you do anything else with them. Don't sign anything, don't throw anything away, and don't tell Marcus you've spoken to me." That night I found the papers in the kitchen drawer, underneath a stack of old warranty cards and a church bulletin from a funeral I'd attended in the spring. I sat at the same kitchen table where Marcus would later set down his leather portfolio, and I read every page slowly, the way I used to read engineering specs when a client's life or a town's water supply depended on getting it right. It was a durable power of attorney. Broad language, the kind that would have given Marcus full authority over my finances, my property, and my medical decisions, effective immediately upon signature, no waiting for incapacity, no second signature required, no oversight built in at all. Buried on the 4th page, in the kind of small dense paragraph designed to be skimmed past, was a clause authorizing him to manage, sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of real property, meaning this house, as deemed necessary for the principal's care and financial well-being. My son had drawn up paperwork that would let him sell my house out from under me, and he tried to slide it past me between a leaky faucet and a phone call. I photographed every page like Rosalind asked, sitting there at my kitchen table with Pepper's head resting on my foot, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not rage, exactly. Something quieter and colder than rage. I felt like a man looking at a crack in a dam, calculating exactly how much water was behind it and exactly how much time he had before it gave way. I called Rosalind the next morning and read her the language over the phone. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said the words that changed the whole direction of what came next. "Walter, I want to come to your house, not as your friend, as your attorney. I think it's time you had someone in your corner who understands exactly what your son is trying to do, and exactly how to stop it." That's when the middle of this story really begins, the part where I stopped just noticing and started building something back. Over the following weeks, Rosalind and I worked quietly, meeting twice at her office in downtown Asheville, and once at my kitchen table on a Saturday when I knew Marcus had a golf outing and wouldn't be dropping by unannounced. We didn't do anything dramatic. We did what careful people do. Rosalind pulled records. She confirmed I was, medically and legally, in full possession of my faculties, with a formal cognitive evaluation from my longtime doctor to put on paper in case anyone ever tried to claim otherwise. She helped me draft my own power of attorney naming Lisa, not Marcus, along with a healthcare directive that made my wishes explicit and unambiguous. And she helped me understand, piece by piece, just how serious what Marcus had attempted actually was. "This isn't just a family disagreement, Walter," she told me one afternoon, tapping the photographed pages spread across her desk. "If he'd gotten you to sign this, and then used it to sell your house or drain your accounts, that's not a gray area. That's financial elder abuse. It's a crime in this state, and it's one prosecutors take seriously, especially when there's documentation like this. I didn't want to send my son to prison. I want to be honest about that, because I know some people listening to this might expect me to say I did. I didn't. What I wanted was for him to understand, in a way he couldn't talk his way around, that his father was not an easy mark, was not confused, was not going anywhere, and had seen exactly what he'd tried to do. Marcus kept coming around during those weeks, and I let him. I made him coffee. I asked about work. I let him bring up, gently, the subject of getting some paperwork squared away, just to make things easier down the road. I nodded along and told him I'd think about it, and every single time, I watched him leave a little more confident that the old man was coming around. He had no idea I was working with Rosalind. He had no idea the copies were already made, the evaluation was already documented, my own protective paperwork was already filed. He thought he was closing in on something. He didn't know I'd already closed the door. The morning it all came to a head started ordinary enough. Marcus called and said he wanted to stop by, said he had the final version of the paperwork ready, said his associate had cleaned up the language and it was ready to sign whenever I was. I told him to come on by around 10. I called Rosalind right after and asked if she'd be willing to be there when he arrived. "I've been waiting for you to ask," she said. She got to my house at 9:30, and we sat at the kitchen table together, going over everything one more time, making sure I understood exactly what I was going to say and exactly what I wasn't going to let him talk me past. Pepper lay under the table between us, the way she always did when the house had visitors she trusted. At 10 o'clock sharp, I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. He came in through the side door the way he always had since he was a teenager, calling out "Dad," before he'd even gotten his shoes off, carrying that leather portfolio I mentioned at the start, the one he'd bought himself as a graduation gift from business school 15 years ago, and still used because it made him look, in his own words, put together. He rounded the corner into the kitchen already talking, something about traffic on I-40, and then he stopped. Rosalind was sitting at my kitchen table, in the chair Carol used to sit in, with a folder of her own in front of her, considerably thicker than his. I watched my son's face do something I will remember until the day I die. The easy, practiced smile he'd worn into my kitchen for 2 hours a week over the past 4 months didn't fall off all at once. It slid off slowly, like ice sliding off a roof in the first warm week of spring, and underneath it was something much younger, and much more afraid than a 44-year-old man in an expensive suit has any business looking. "Dad," he said, and then to Rosalind, "Careful, I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." "Rosalind Chin," she said, not standing, not extending a hand, entirely pleasant and entirely immovable. "I'm your father's attorney." The portfolio in his hand dropped about 2 inches before he caught it again. "I didn't realize Dad had Dad. Did you hire a lawyer?" "I did," I said. "Sit down, son. Coffee's still hot." He didn't sit down right away. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen I raised him in, looking between me and Rosalind, doing the math, and I could see the exact moment he finished the calculation and didn't like the answer. I don't understand what's happening here," he said, and his voice had lost the easy confidence it usually carried. "I brought paperwork for the estate. This is a family matter." "It was a family matter," Rosalind said. Right up until the language in the power of attorney you brought your father 2 months ago gave you unrestricted authority to sell his home and control his finances effective immediately, with no independent oversight and no protection for him whatsoever. At that point, Marcus, it became a legal matter. I watched the blood leave his face. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something honest there. Something like a boy who'd been caught, not a wealth strategist in an expensive suit. Dad, that's not... I wasn't trying to... That language is standard. That's just how these documents are written. I would never actually... You would never actually what, Marcus? I asked him, and I kept my voice even, the way I used to keep it even in board meetings when a contractor was trying to talk his way around a shortfall in materials. Sell my house? Because that's exactly what the document said you could do. Whenever you decided it was necessary, no judge, no second opinion, no me. I never would have used it that way. Then why did it need to say you could? He didn't have an answer for that. Rosalind let the silence sit for a moment, and then she slid her folder an inch across the table, not opening it, just letting him see how thick it was. Here's where things stand, she said. Your father has had a full cognitive evaluation from his physician of 19 years, which is now on file, confirming he is fully competent to manage his own affairs. He has executed his own power of attorney, naming your sister, and a complete healthcare directive. Copies of the document you attempted to have him sign are also on file, along with a timeline of the visits and conversations leading up to it. Your father has decided not to pursue criminal charges at this time. Marcus sat down hard in the chair across from us, the fight going out of him all at once, and for a second I felt something close to sorry for him. Close, but not quite there. At this time, he repeated quietly. That's correct, Rosalind said. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet, which surprised me, because I hadn't seen my son cry since his mother's funeral. Dad, I never wanted to hurt you. I've got debt you don't know about. The second divorce took everything. The business isn't doing what I told you it's doing, and I panicked. And I thought if I just handled things for you, took some of the weight off you, it would work out for everybody. You don't handle a person, Marcus. You handle a problem. Your mother and I raised you to know the difference. He didn't say anything to that. There wasn't anything to say. I told him, once Rosalind had laid out where things stood, that I wasn't going to pursue anything against him, not because what he did wasn't serious, but because he was still my son, and because some kinds of consequence don't need a courtroom to land. I told him I loved him, and that I would keep loving him, but that I would not be signing anything he brought me ever again without Rosalind reviewing it first, that Lisa now held my power of attorney, and that if he ever tried something like this again, the folder on that table would stop being a precaution and start being evidence. He left that morning without the portfolio. I don't know if he forgot it or left it on purpose. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I finally put it up in the hall closet, where it still is. It's been about 5 months since that morning. Marcus and I talk now, actually talk, more honestly than we have in years. He's in real financial trouble, it turns out, worse than what he admitted that day, and he's working with an actual credit counselor now, instead of trying to solve it by quietly repositioning his father's assets. I helped him some, not with a blank check, but with a real plan, the kind Rosalind helped me structure, with oversight and limits and nothing that puts my house or my future at risk. Lisa flew in last month and the three of us had dinner together for the first time since Carol's funeral, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't fully healed, but it was honest, which is more than I could say for the 4 months before Rosalind sat down at my kitchen table. I think about that morning a lot, the way his smile slid off his face when he saw Rosalind sitting where his mother used to sit. I don't feel proud of it, exactly. I feel something more like relief, the same relief I used to feel when we caught a crack in a water main before it became a flood instead of after. Here's what I want to say to anybody listening to this who's my age, who's got children circling a little closer than they used to, asking a few too many questions about the house, the bills, the accounts, dressed up as concern. Trust your gut. Get your own paperwork in order before anybody else tries to write it for you. Find your own Rosalind, whoever that is for you, a friend, a lawyer, someone in your corner who isn't waiting on your inheritance. Loving your children doesn't mean handing them the keys to everything you spent a lifetime building, not without a second set of eyes on the door. I'm not angry anymore. I'm careful. There's a difference, and it took me 69 years and one leather portfolio on my kitchen table to finally learn it.